Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Robin, for having us this morning. As Robin said, I'm Kate Sylvester. I'm the Deputy Administrator. I work really closely with the planning, engineering, and construction groups at MTA. Kimiya, go ahead to the next slide, please.
Sure.
So really excited to be able to talk about the Red Line project this morning. We want to do a little bit of just level setting in case there are folks who haven't been involved previously in the Red Line project, and share with you the process that we're going to be undertaking over the next several months. Tease the open houses, the meetings that we have coming up for you to participate in, encourage others to participate, learn more, talk with us in a more extended basis about the project and the options that we're considering, and answer some questions that you might have about how we're moving forward. So introductory, the Red Line project has been around for 20 plus years, as many of you know. In 2020, MTA undertook the East-West feasibility study, which looked at 7 alternatives traveling east-west across the city, primarily between Woodlawn or Social Security on the west and Bayview on the east. We also looked at extending that corridor out to Essex on the east and Ellicott City on the west. That study found a strong need and potential for premium transit service, and really reaffirmed the potential and opportunity for this type of investment in the Red Line corridor specifically. The Red Line project addresses really a major gap in that premium transit service across our region. There's a decade plus of engineering and environmental studies, as well as very committed community participation that we have to build on with this project. It will connect thousands of residents to jobs throughout the region, students to educational opportunities, provide premium transit access to seniors and people with various types of disabilities. It helps us meet our climate and environmental goals by shifting trips to transit. It serves communities of color and areas of poverty, areas with households with limited vehicle access. And it also, an important piece of the project is connecting our existing transit system, improving the connections among the sort of disparate pieces of rail systems and bus systems that we have today into a more connected system. You go ahead to the next slide, please. So on June 15th, just over a month ago, Governor Moore at the West Baltimore MARC Station announced formally the relaunch of the Red Line project. He was joined by 15 other speakers from the federal, state, local, community, business levels, really showing a very strong collective commitment to advance the Red Line project efficiently, while also modernizing the project for today. It's amazing to see this level of alignment between all levels of government, and I think really provides an opportunity for this project to be successful. So over the last several months, MTA has been working with our partners at Federal Transit to figure out how we move this project forward. What comes next as we're able to restart this project? Many of you know it went through, the Red Line project went through the NEPA process and reached a record of decision previously. In 2015, the record of decision was rescinded, so the project no longer has a record of decision. Also, under environmental regulations, as time elapses, you're required to go back and revisit your analysis. So what we've determined is that the East-West feasibility study is a very helpful tool for bringing some of the analysis on the project up to current, and that's allowed us to help focus the questions and analysis that we're undertaking now. So we're now in alternatives development phase. We are working with FTA to hopefully very soon issue an early scoping notice, which basically means that all of the environmental and technical project analysis, all of the community participation and comments that we collect starting now become part of the record that we're building and part of the case that we're building toward reestablishing a record of decision on the project. So starting to move forward towards those key federal decisions on the project. So this slide and map is also on our website. It was at the launch. This shows the key questions that we're focusing on in alternatives development. So we're looking at transit mode. Should this project be a light rail project or a bus rapid transit project? We're looking at the extent of tunneling. So there's the previous preferred alternative on the Red Line project had a tunnel from the segment you can see on here through downtown, as well as a short tunnel at Cook's Lane. So we're looking at those again, at options to maintain those tunnels or change those tunnels. And then there's also been some development and changes on the eastern end of the corridor in land use. So we need to look at how do we pass through East Baltimore and approach Bayview in light of those land use changes that have occurred. So that's the focus of the analysis that we're doing in alternatives development. We are very much listening to hear sort of what the sentiment is in the community and document that, what the focus is, and that'll be considered alongside of technical analysis that we share in the fall about how these different options are performing. So I'm going to turn it over to Kimmy from here.
Thank you, Kate, and good morning, everybody. Nice to join you. So as Kate said, we're really working through that technical analysis, but also working to make sure we're receiving input and sharing that information out with various stakeholders and the public at large. We're working with our partners and our stakeholders and the public together to help to define what those important needs are that the project needs to address. And then look at the different options with transparency and to really weigh the pros and cons, right? To really understand the trade-offs as we look at the different options. And then together come to that preferred alternative that reflects both the current and then the future conditions and the priorities of our communities, of our stakeholders and of our partners. This little timeline here really focuses in on the near term, right? Obviously, the project will not be finished in the winter of 2024, but this focused period here, we're really showing how the technical and the engagement pieces come together. Here we are in the summer. I'll get into a little bit more detail, but we're really receiving and then incorporating feedback to help refine alternatives that we're developing. Then we'll be completing that detailed study by the fall. Looking at the costs and the benefits, the impacts, a lot of that more detailed information I know people are really excited and want to learn about. So that is coming later this fall. Again, we'll be receiving input on that. And then from there coming together to identify the alternative or alternatives that will advance into the federal environmental process and then into the funding process as well from there. So I mentioned public outreach engagement. It's very important in this project, understandably, as it was right in the 10 years ago when the Red Line first started. We have an outreach and engagement plan that's on the website. I'll put the link up at the end of the presentation. And as I mentioned, we're really having ongoing public outreach activities throughout the alternatives development. While you'll see here, and I'll detail some really focused periods of engagement, we're already out there talking with folks, and we will continue to even between the summer and fall and then following the fall as well. So it is an ongoing activity for us. We also think it's very important, we know it's very important to make sure that we can reach people a number of different ways. So we will be posting, any materials that we go out with will then be posted onto the website. So if say someone's on vacation, they miss out, they haven't really missed out on the opportunity to learn and to participate. We're starting in-person pop-ups along the corridor over the next month. And we're also attending community meetings, organizational meetings such as this one as invited, to make sure that we're reaching people on the ground as well. And then holding conversations with stakeholders that maybe need a little bit more detail because they're a property owner or something like that is along the corridor. So these focused engagement periods that you see here, summer and fall, are really intentionally aligned with project milestones. This is not a project where, you know, we go out every few months because that's what we're doing. We go out when we have information to share, and we have information we want to receive back from the community at a moment where it can inform the project. We want to respect people's time, their knowledge, their energy, and make sure that we are getting that information when it matters most. So summer, I mentioned, we're just kicking off now, a really focused period. In this time, we're really sharing project background and context, as Kate was going through a little bit earlier, talking through that anticipated alternatives map and looking at the key considerations around it, and gathering public priorities that will help to inform and refine the project as it moves ahead. By the time we come back in the fall, so more like October, November timeframe, we'll have more technical analysis outcomes to talk about. While we're out here talking, the technical team is hard at work right now, so that we will be able to come back with that more deep information that I know everyone would like, and talk through those trade-offs that I mentioned a little bit earlier. Of course, we'll talk through next steps to advance, and again, be gathering public input on the technical results that we've found in those trade-offs. I mentioned the engagement plan that's up on the website. This is something that I really encourage you to take a look at. While it's a living document, we're very proud of it. It really lays out the timing and the tools for our stakeholder and public engagement efforts throughout this phase of work. It details the types of information that will be shared, and then also the input that we'll be gathering through this phase. So the engagement plan itself is really based on USDOT, or United States Department of Transportation, guidance that they released in October 2022. So this is fresh. And it really is driven towards equitable and meaningful engagement. So this perfectly aligned with our goals, and it was a great inspiration to help to make sure that we were aligning with what our federal partners are really hoping to see in projects like this one. I mentioned how we strategically link those technical activities and engagement activities. I don't expect you to be able to see this chart in great detail that you see here. It's a screenshot from the engagement plan, but it's to be really transparent about what we're working on technically, and then what we'll be sharing publicly, so that you can really start to see how those two pieces layer together, and that it really is a meaningful activity when we're coming to gather input. The open houses we've mentioned a couple times that are just starting on the 26th. There are 5 along the corridor, though you'll see a couple of them are almost like double meetings. They're 4 hours long. And that's because we understand that people have many things going on in their lives. So we want to make it convenient should someone wish to attend one of these open houses. However, we also know that there are plenty of people who just can't, for whatever reason, make these times, these places. And so we'll also be creating a narrated version of the boards. The open houses are set up as open houses, right? You can move about the room, but we want folks that are seeing those boards online to also have the experience of what the narrative would be from the technical team present. And so that will be available on the project website in the coming weeks. And you know, we know that sometimes someone's just has a strange schedule and they have plenty of time in the middle of the night. Let them enjoy that open house material as well. And then, of course, the survey, the map materials, those will be available as well. So they can both look at the information and then give us their input, just as if they had been at the open house. We can maybe come back to this at the very end as well. Don't feel like you have to madly write things down, but the website is redlinemaryland.com. From there, you can get to the rest of these things, honestly. So that's really the one you need to know. But we have team email that you can reach the outreach team. We have a Twitter account, a Facebook account. These things will become a little bit more active in the very near term as we start having more information going out. But if you want to sign up, like, etc., follow now. That is a good way to stay engaged. We'll be pushing out information throughout the project lifetime here. So, but the website, if you're writing something down, that's your central repository. And it already has quite a lot of information. If you haven't looked at it, gives a lot of background context. While probably most folks on this call have known about the Red Line and been engaged in the Red Line, there are plenty of people in our region for whom this is really their first introduction. And we want to make sure that they're not feeling left behind in any way. So we have a good amount of background information up there currently as well, so that we can all start from a level playing field. I'll hand it back to Kate.
So we recognize there's many other projects going on along the corridor, interacting with the corridor, that all work together to build the transit system that we're all looking for in the region. And so I want to take just a moment to talk a little bit about those. We want to keep the focus on the red line, but we know that we get questions about these projects and how we're thinking about how they interact with the red line. One of the things that Governor Moore's administration has been very clear on is wanting to see immediate action in this corridor, that the communities along this corridor and really the region have been waiting for this project for a very long time. And while we're doing everything we can to expedite the project, while following all of the regulations and the funding processes that we need to go through to make it a reality, it's still going to take a number of years to get there. So what can we do in the shorter term so that we're starting to see enhanced transit in these communities that really need it today? So if you go to the next slide. So the first thing is launching the QuickLink 40. This will go into effect with our fall service change at the end of August. So this is a limited stop service. There was previously, as many of you know, limited stop service in this corridor. We're reintroducing it. This is a 15-mile corridor along the CityLink Orange and Blue, so very similar to, although not identical to, the Red Line corridor that will see faster travel east to west across the region. The next slide. Then in sort of the medium term, we have our East-West Raise project underway. This was a successful federal discretionary grant in 2021, I want to say. I could be off by a year on that. $50 million, one of the largest RAISE grants USDOT awarded, which we were really pleased to see. City, state, and federal investment along those CityLink Blue and CityLink Orange routes that are the same, where we're putting the QuickLink 40. So the types of improvements in this project are there on the sort of bottom right: bicycle and pedestrian safety improvements. There'll be some electric vehicle charging stations, pedestrian lighting, some segments of dedicated bus lanes, also looking at things like bus bulbs that allow the bus to not have to pull out of the lane of traffic to drop off and pick up passengers safely, so that it can continue along its way without having excessive stop delay, transit signal priority, and bus stop enhancements. So for this project, there were some initial design concepts shared with the communities and the public this past spring. A lot of great feedback collected. The team is actively incorporating that feedback into the designs, making some changes, and updated designs will be shared again with the communities this fall. And those will be improvements that can be constructed in a couple of years, so ahead of the red line, but not this year like the QuickLink 40, so sort of that midterm. Sorry, you go ahead to the next one, thanks. Also want to mention the West Baltimore United planning effort. As again, many of you are probably familiar with, Baltimore City was awarded a $2 million Reconnecting Communities pilot program to do a plan for the Highway to Nowhere. And so this is going to look at existing conditions, the traffic circulation, market demand, and I expect this to have very much a land use focus on how the communities can be stitched together and with public amenities and redevelopment and things along this corridor. Baltimore City is in the lead on this. We are working closely with them and expect to be plugged in with them throughout this project to make sure that the Red Line project is fully supporting the vision that's advancing through Reconnecting West Baltimore. The Red Line project is probably going to move faster than the Reconnecting West Baltimore project, but I think there's great opportunity and enough prior work that's been done to ensure that no decisions made on the Red Line preclude things that are being discussed or envisioned as part of the West Baltimore United study. That study's just getting out of the gate. Baltimore City's working on the grant agreements and putting together the team for that, but we'll be continuing to work with them going forward. And then the last project I wanted to mention is an East Baltimore County access study. So one of the other findings from the East-West Corridor feasibility study that we completed was the potential for premium transit to Eastern Baltimore County. We looked at Essex. There's also probably potential to Trade Point Atlantic area that we know from other work that we're doing, and also just from existing in the region and seeing that job center grow. So we've committed to undertaking an East Baltimore County access study kicking off this year, and really looking at how do we think about connecting the core part of our region and ensuring that the Red Line project could in the future be extended to additional premium transit service to Eastern Baltimore County. So with that, I want to bring it back to the Red Line and these key questions and where we are in our process that we've described. Would hope to take any questions clarifying where we are, why we're studying what we're studying, or how we're approaching the process. I know that there's a need for more discussion than we're going to be able to have this morning, so really would encourage you to attend one of the open houses or contact our project team if you want to have a more lengthy discussion. But I'll turn it back to Robin, and we'll be happy to take questions.
Thank you, Kate, and thank you, Kimmy, for your presentation. We certainly recognize how very busy you both are, really handling a multitude of projects. And so we are very appreciative of your time this morning. And we will certainly like to invite you back, perhaps in October, November, whenever it makes sense to provide an update on the project and continued next steps. If you wouldn't mind taking down the presentation, please. Sure. We are going to move into our Q&A section of the meeting. And what I'd like to do is to ask those that have a question, comment, or would like to give their feedback. You can either raise your hand so I can see that clearly, or if you would prefer to put your comment in the chat. I would respectfully ask that you are aware of keeping your comments brief, because we really want to give everyone the opportunity to share their thoughts and to have their voices heard. So with that said, let me see. I have a hand. Peter Duvall, let's start with you.
Sure. I have a question. It's always been presumed during the Red Line process that Bayview was the only possible terminus for the east side. And, I've looked at Bayview and the rail yard and the private property, and it seems to me to be very hemmed in and very little transit-oriented development available. So I was wondering if other terminus, other endings of the line could be considered, have been considered, if that's part of people's thinking at all.
Great, I'm happy to start with that one. Great question. And I'm going to try to pull a few pieces together from the presentation here. So we mentioned that we're really trying to build upon the good work from the past, right? Both from 2020 and then the previous Red Line as well. In order to move things along efficiently, effectively, we're already working with our partners at FTA. While there is flexibility, right? There's some squishiness, maybe is the way to put it. When we're looking at some of the alignment options, the mode choices, et cetera, keeping things relatively focused and the same, I guess is the right word, with the terminus is important. The East Baltimore Access Study is going to be studying exactly what you're talking about. But that is those extensions, right? Those additional transit investments to the east or to the west are at a much earlier stage. So if we are to grind to a halt and wait, it really slows down the project and also doesn't allow us to capitalize on this moment where we have really beautiful alignment at the local, the state, the federal level. And our federal partners are really there engaging with us and giving us that advice and input. So, FTA is obviously a very important partner here. And so that is something that we've been talking about in collaboration with them, and how to appropriately look at some of those other investments that can build upon that core investment from the red line. Kate, anything you'd want to add to that?
No, I think you covered it. Yeah.
So it's kind of the Bayview, and some of those key decisions are kind of like sunk costs that can't really be addressed at this point.
I guess I would say the part of the East-West feasibility study I'll go back to again is it showed that there's still transit benefit of serving those destinations along the red line. So there is still a large job center at Bayview, a large population of employees, and to some extent probably patrons as well, who are likely to use transit. So there's still a strong rationale to serve Bayview, and we have a lot of the technical work, the design work, the environmental work that we can build on to achieve that goal. There's lots of places throughout the region, including places further east, including north of Patterson Park. There's lots of places throughout our region that also have demand for premium transit. We can't serve everything with one project. So while we see the need is still there for the red line, we're picking up the red line and carrying that project forward. It doesn't mean that those other places and destinations don't need or shouldn't be part of another transit project that we can undertake, or other, efforts to provide better service to additional areas.
Thank you. Daniel?
Hey everyone, thanks for being here today. My name is Daniel. I cover transportation for the Baltimore Banner. And I have two questions, but Robin, I'm happy to just give one and then pass the mic, and then if there's time to come back to me.
Sure.
But I was wondering, I just wanted to clarify what you were mentioning about the West Baltimore connection project dealing with the highway to nowhere. You said that you did not anticipate it finishing before the red line. Is that finishing the feasibility study, or finishing the study of what to do, or is it just the project of the redevelopment of that highway not anticipating being done before the red line?
I'm happy to start with that one. So I know I'm well acquainted with the project that was proposed to USDOT for funding. It looks at a two-year planning study to really assess the needs of, the characteristics of, the priorities, et cetera, of the community, also the technical merits of all different options that you could see in that space. And then from there, Baltimore City would need to then apply again for construction funding, There's planning money and there's construction money, which would then be, we haven't yet started the planning study, in Baltimore. So it'd still be 2 years before they're applying for those construction funds. It's just on a little bit of a different timeline to even come to what they're wanting to fund, and then beginning to put a funding package together to advance through engineering, design, and then implementation. So while we are, of course, committed to coordinating as much as is appropriate, given that these two projects are in the same space and impacting the same communities and certain geographies, they're a little bit staggered in that way. We're not in lockstep schedule-wise, but we are in terms of coordination moving forward.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to clarify that. I probably didn't explain that very well. I just say, I think on the planning side, we don't want to wait for this planning stage we need to do for the red line to get back through the NEPA process for the 2-year study for reconnecting West Baltimore to complete before we complete the planning for the red line. So the red line planning is moving forward alongside the planning study for the reconnecting West Baltimore project. I think as we reach the more final design stages of the red line, we'll know a lot, and hopefully that reconnecting West Baltimore study will be done. And so we'll have a really great opportunity a couple of years from now to, before the red line goes to construction, and as we're putting together those final construction documents for the red line, to take advantage of opportunities to kind of leverage the projects together, or see if there's ways that the red line construction can support the goals that are established in the reconnecting West Baltimore study. So I do think the two projects have an opportunity to come together and work together as one in some ways. Just at the place that we're at right now, we're moving ahead on the planning with the red line, and Reconnecting West Baltimore is going to pick up and come alongside.
Klaus?
Yeah, thank you. I want to circle back to the comments that Kim and Kate made about, respecting the communities and recognizing that they don't have all the time, and that they also may be quite jaded. We all know that communities in Baltimore are asked much more often to what their visions are and their needs and their wants, than that they actually get something that is an actual improvement. And that is especially true for the Red Line corridor, where communities were engaged in the SACs in the station area action committees for 18 months at 15 stations, and really spend lots and lots of time saying what their priorities and their wishes are. And we all know that Baltimore doesn't change that much and that quickly, and that the same community leaders are still out there and the same needs are still out there. And the East-West Corridor study pretty much confirmed also a lot of the demographic updates. So my question and recommendation also is, when you go back and ask communities, don't start from scratch. Don't say, oh yeah, let's hear everything that you want to tell us, but recognize that they told you a lot of stuff already, and ask maybe the question, this is what the communities told us in the past during the red line process. What has changed? What new views may you have, or something? But if there's no recognition of these vision plans that are for these 15 stations, all well documented, and if there is no recognition why these decisions were made towards tunnel and mode as rail, and what the communities told you then I think you will run into a lot of frustration and people saying, why the hell are you asking us the exact same questions again? And I realize that the FTA and the NEPA process requires you to repeat some of these things, but there is still a matter of how you do it and how you ask the communities. I would strongly recommend to really respect what they have told you in the past. And then very quickly related question is the link, the Quick Bus 40 revival and the deviation of the alignment from what that used to be, and when it went to CVS and Social Security, and now it's going out Route 40 towards Howard County. And I wondered what analysis you did to make that change, and how that informs the red line alignment planning. Thank you.
Kimmy, do you want to address the community involvement piece, and then I can take the.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to. And Klaus, thank you for your comments. We absolutely agree that in any project, right, it's important to respect the time, the energy, the commitment of community members, whether it's today or 10 years ago. And we certainly are doing our part to look at what's been done in the past, look at the input, the decisions, right, that have been made, and look at those as context for moving forward. But it would not be, and it wouldn't be appropriate to just leave them as is and say, well, everyone feels exactly the same today as they did 10, 15 years ago in some cases. And also there are things that have changed, right? I understand that many things are consistent, but there are a few things that have changed. One important change in Baltimore is the Complete Streets legislation, which really changes how we think about roadways, the right of way, who gets priority and how. And that is actually quite a dramatic change. And so some of the questions we're looking at really are influenced by that change, that almost philosophical, not just legal, but philosophical change about the public right of way. And so it is right, it is worthy to ask some of these questions, not from a blank slate, but to not just assume that the voices of the past, the context of the past is what has to inform our decisions moving forward into the future. But I definitely take your point, and we are not just throwing the baby out with the bathwater in terms of all of that good work from the past.
Thanks, Kimmy. On the Route 40 versus Social Security piece, this is something that we, well, I can't speak to the Baltimore Link analysis and decisions. That predates my time with MTA, but we did include options on Route 40 and up to Social Security in the East-West feasibility study, and we got some good data and also stakeholder comments out of that study about those two options for a Western terminus. And this is another area, not unlike the East Side, where both perform well and sort of similarly well. We did and are continuing to do some additional follow-up with Social Security to understand what their workforce, in the office presence is going to be going forward, which is important to that Social Security terminus. But we also know that Baltimore County is moving forward with redevelopment of Social Security, of the Security Square Mall, which presents some opportunities there. So our takeaway was that both had transit demand, economic development opportunities, workforce opportunities, and there wasn't really a strong reason to move away from the red line corridor that had been, sort of to your point, there had been so much input on it, so much work done previously to abandon it for Route 40 when both are strong options.
Jim? Jim, you're still muted.
Button. Okay. I think the important thing you're talking about is that the world has changed in 10 years. There are new destinations. Those destinations require different riders than maybe were originally envisioned in the red line. More people who are classic Baltimoreans, people who are blue collar workers, people of color. Building the red line on Boston Street is really the absolute worst idea that continues today among the fans of that alignment, because that's not where the people are that are going to ride it. The people that are going to ride it are up more in the Eastern Avenue or Monument Street corridors, and they will be corridors that will get ridership without carrying the risk of flooding, sea level rise, and all of that business. And it may require more tunneling, it may not. Now, on the tunneling issue, the issue that really considerably persists is that the metro is dying. The existing metro is dying. It's got 4,000 riders a day now. The tunnel under Baltimore Street is terribly underutilized, and it needs to be reinvigorated in some way. And I think to have that separated from whatever the red line becomes is a dastardly mistake and a misuse of existing resources. I think I can't say that strongly enough. It's critical that we figure out how to use the resources that have already been invested in and built. Now, I know part of the problem is they've rolled out using heavy rail. I don't understand how that decision was ever made. It just plain doesn't make sense. Now, it makes sense if you can figure out how to reuse the metro in some way with a light rail system. But if you can't do that, you have heavy rail. And it's there today. It doesn't need to be built again. It's there. Figure out how to use it. I'm sorry, I don't want it to go any further, but those are issues that just jump out at me, have jumped out at me from the very beginning. And I think it's a critical thing that MTA looks seriously at the limited investments that it has available And one of the investments it has available is existing infrastructure. I'll shut up.
I can, a couple thoughts on the different pieces of what you said. I want to start with the east side piece on Monument Street or Eastern having stronger ridership. Again, this is a piece where the East-West feasibility study gave us some good data and analysis to work with. And what we found in that study is that there's a lot of transit riders in those areas, as you point out, right? There's a lot of lower income folks who are using transit for their trips. But what that doesn't do is connect to as many jobs. So the jobs that the red line was intended to hit in Southeast Baltimore are further south. So there's, again, it was that both are valuable transit corridors to improve service to, but the purpose and need for the red line was focused on connecting residents and jobs, and a lot of those jobs are on the southeast side.
What are those jobs that it picks up on the southeast side along Boston Street? What jobs are they?
Retail jobs and service industry jobs, things like that. But yeah, and we'll have that data when we come out in the fall too. I don't sit here having updated numbers yet. The technical team is working away on that stuff now. So I hear your point, and I don't disagree with it, that there are a lot of potential transit riders on the east side further north. And also there are some job centers and different residents further south on the east side. So just a point to point out, not a right or wrong thing. On the tunnel section, I think one of the real discussion points that needs to be sort of vetted out through looking at these options this fall is that a surface LRT potentially gives us the opportunity to have a really strong connection with our existing light rail system and turn it into more of a system, whereas a tunnel LRT gives us an opportunity to have a more direct connection with our metro system. Doing both of those things with one option is more challenging. These systems are still coming together geographically. They're within an easy walking distance, but having that really strong connection that we love to see between transit modes, there is a little bit of a trade-off. And then when it gets into the really technical details of reusing existing infrastructure and tying into what's there and the plan that existed for where the red line tunnel would go and the pedestrian connection and stuff there, I have to direct you to the technical team, but I would just say it's not trivial. It's not as easy as using existing infrastructure that's there. It's a pretty complex situation.
It may be complex and it may not be trivial, but it deserves study. And that has not been studied in detail.
Thank you, Jim. Daniel, we'll go back to you. You had a second question.
Sure. Hey, thank you, Robin. So I understand if it's too soon to get to this point, too soon to tell, but I was just wondering if there is any chance that a P3, a public-private partnership, could be used in order to get the red line done, and if so, if the experience with the purple line recently down in the DC suburbs has kind of given MTA, MDOT any kind of other thoughts on that, or if it's something that they're monitoring closely in the decision-making process for the red line.
Go ahead, Kate.
So we're a little early in the process to be doing that full analysis of our delivery approach. That will be required to do a very rigorous analysis of the delivery approach and consider all the options and pros and cons. And we certainly have lessons learned from the purple line that I think would inform whether we decide to go P3 or some other approach. As a state, we've learned some things from going through the purple line that we could apply to implementing the red line.
Kate and Kimmy, I have a question with respect to, I think it's more timeline related, but, and if you covered this, forgive me for sort of asking you to reiterate. The timeline for going back to the feds for funding is when? for the project? I'm talking specifically the Red Line project.
Kate, do you want me to take that one?
Sure.
So I don't think we mentioned this in this presentation, though I know it's been out there, planning to apply for CIG or capital investment grant funding. That's federal funding that is highly competitive, right? It's not like the federal government's just waiting to hand out checks. So we are working efficiently to prepare to apply to enter the president's fiscal year 2026 budget, which we will have to do in August of 2024. So there's a big time difference there. So that would then, let's assume we're totally successful, everything's wonderful, begin a 2-year project development phase under CIG. You have a tight clock, like you have to be done. And then move into engineering from there. Of course, the lifespan schedule will be influenced by the decisions that are made about the project in these early phases in terms of, mode, extent of tunneling, et cetera. But that is the general timeline that we're working towards applying to enter the president's budget.
So that's pretty much a year coming up. We're coming up on, so a year. And then the second part of my question is, I'm assuming, although you both are much more expert at this, that the funds are very competitive.
Yes.
Right. So there are, I'm assuming, other very large cities
Yes.
that are also going to be applying.
That's right. That's right.
And I raised that question because one of our Transit Choices participants asked me to clarify, does Baltimore get to go first in line? So given the fact that we obtained funding, we returned that funding, does Baltimore get to kind of get back? I'm sort of paraphrasing their question, but do they get to get back first in line?
There was legislation, I believe our Maryland federal folks pushed ahead, that basically prevents a project or an applicant from being almost penalized, right? You don't have to necessarily go all the way to the back of the line. Now, when we say the line, like it's not quite as straightforward, right? Like we are already working with our federal partners. We are already engaging. We're already getting in their input. It's not that nobody knows the project exists until we've entered, the CIG pipeline. So no, we don't anticipate being like punished for having returned those funds. Right? There was a different administration then, but I don't know that means we get to just like skip right to the front necessarily and the funding is ours. We still have to compete for those funds with, LA or Minneapolis or Austin, many cities advancing these projects for these competitive funds that can cover up to half of a project's cost. So we're talking about a lot of money here. Kate, anything you'd add on there?
I guess the only thing I would add or highlight, you mentioned it, but I think it's just important to point out is the capital investment grants, the New Starts grants are, an incredibly rigorous evaluation process and very strict criteria on which the projects are evaluated. So there are more eligible applicants than there is funding available at the federal level. So there is sort of a line, but the funding determination is also based on the performance of the project. So there's cost effectiveness criteria, ridership criteria, economic development criteria. There's a rubric of how the projects are evaluated. There's FTA staff that very closely review all of the inputs to those things. That's part of the CIG process. And so the success with getting that federal funding is very much about the performance of the project versus just like, when we enter the program and sort of waiting our turn.
And the last part of my question has to do with the criteria for the project in terms of is there room for deviation? In other words, does it have to be the project for which you're going for funding, the red line? Can it vary in scope? Is there room for changes given the time that's elapsed? Or does the project have to be pretty much in alignment, forgive the pun, with the previous proposal and request for funding?
There's so I don't know if I can talk and get it up quickly enough. I start to fail when I'm doing things on the screen.
That's okay.
But that map that is on the website, I can bring it up again in a moment. That shows, you'll see there's some squishiness on that line, right? And we're talking about tunneling questions. We're talking about mode questions, and that is okay and appropriate here. In fact, if we were not looking at some of these different questions for today, I think our federal partners would really raise an eyebrow on that one, right? So it is important that we be able to analyze these different options within the same spirit of the project, right? Within the same bounds, to be able to account for changes that have happened. And they have, right? Just off the top of my head, if we think of the Southeast area, like Canton Crossing area, density has changed dramatically in terms of retail jobs, apartments, housing. And so it's appropriate to look at the project with a fresh set of eyes to see if there are tweaks that need to be made to make it appropriate for today and the future. And that does not disqualify us or toss it to the end of the line as a brand new, it's right. And the way in which we're doing that is with federal partnership, is with our local partners as well, so that we are coming together and moving ahead with decisions that are right, but are not, to use the same analogy I did earlier, throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
Right.
So there may be guardrails for how much we can vary, but no, it's not just fully baked. Those were the decisions of the past, come what may.
I understand. Thank you. Joe?
Yes, my question is, how does the red line tie into the West Baltimore MARC station? And if we only have two options on the table, we already have an overcrowded bus system that is already there. So I'm just trying to imagine, how does this all come together?
So the red line and the West Baltimore MARC station are intended to have a meaningful connection. Not just this project, but if we think of the regional transit plan as well, right? The goal is to make these major investments, but also connect them with our existing investments in a way that is meaningful and appropriate, that makes sense, and that further creates a network of transportation, not just for Baltimore City, right, but for our region as a whole. I'm not sure if I'm totally answering your question there, though, but they are intended to connect. West Baltimore, as you folks know, it's already a major hub, which is connecting our bus service with our regional rail service. And this would tie in there as well. The specific design details of that, I cannot speak to at this point.
Okay, so if I just want one more question here. So you guys said that there's two options, and that's bus line and light rail, but heavy rail was taken off the table, correct? Why was it taken off the table? Could you answer that for me, please?
Sure, I'll start, and I think Kate wanted to add on as well. So the East-West feasibility study is recent, right? That we're not only depending on analysis from the past, and that team did look at heavy rail as an option in the East-West corridor. And it didn't perform as well. And coming back to investments that are competitive, investments that are able to compete for and win highly competitive federal funding that can make these types of mega projects financially feasible, it doesn't perform to the level that we need to have that be a viable project for our region.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
I was just going to add, Hi, Joe. Good to see you.
Thank you.
On the connection, how do the projects come together at West Baltimore? Just, I mean, in terms of like a grounded sense of what's envisioned, or, you know, what was envisioned previously, and until we hear some different vision that, you know, tweaks the project and takes it in a different direction. The red line is intended to come through with a, on the inside lanes of Franklin and Mulberry, with a stop at the West Baltimore MARC station. So there would be new, you know, transit station platforms on the sidewalks leading to the West Baltimore MARC station. And you've seen the concepts for the West Baltimore MARC station design. That's part of the Amtrak project that has that staircase and elevators and things that would connect in that same pedestrian plaza.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, we are going to let that be the last, actually, I think we have time for one more. Benjamin?
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to point out that there are a lot of questions in the chat that seem to be going unanswered. So I just wanted to bring that up, but also just another vote for really connecting things would be helpful. You know, we have the MARC, we have the light rail, we have the subway, and none of them are connected to each other. We have the Amtrak station that's not connected. We have the Camden line, it's not connected. And I live in West Baltimore. I have to go over east to go to a doctor, to go to church. I work downtown. And, you know, my preference would be to sell my car so that I could ride transit to get to those things. And I can't, because I have to get on a bus, and the bus takes, with switching lines, takes 2 hours for me to get from the West Baltimore to East Baltimore. And it's just not practical. It takes an hour and a half to get downtown to City Hall. And it's ridiculous. And so, like, there really needs to be a focus on connecting these systems. And I understand that, you know, that you have to make a decision on whether or not to connect to the subway or the light rail. But if there's anything, like, even if there's like an intermediary system that would connect the two, that you could put into part of this plan, it would help so much. As you're talking about, you know, people who use the public transit system, people use a public transit system because they have no choice. There would be a lot more riders like me who have more options, where I do have a car, but I would much prefer to use the public transit system because of parking and because of congestion and because of everything else. So, you know, I'm just putting that out there. If you could really focus on connecting these systems that are just not connected, that would be the preference.
Yeah, thank you for that comment, Benjamin. Going back to one of the earliest slides that Kate covered, right? Connecting with our existing systems today, and then, you know, in the future, as additional investments may be made, making sure they're meaningfully connected as well, is really important. We definitely understand that. It's something that I know was part of the analysis in the East-West feasibility study when I was first relooking at some of these things and affirming this need. It's something that we look at now. And as Kate said, we can't solve all problems with one investment, but we can do our best to make that investment as impactful as possible with those problems. But yes, your point is well taken, and thank you for adding that to the conversation.
Well, again, we thank you both for your presentation. I will be sure that you receive all of the chat messages, and not to add more work to your respective plates, but, you know, we'd like you to take a look at that and then respond as you deem appropriate. Jimmy, would you like to provide the closing remarks?
This has been such a great presentation. I can't express enough how impressed we are by the people at the MTA, how hard they're working, how intelligent their approach is, and how open they are. And so thank you all Kate and Kimmy and Liz, who's not here today, but and Holly. I just think the MTA has a tremendously difficult job to both match all the requirements of federal funding and to try to meet the needs of the community. And I'm sure that that's what they want to do. They want to meet the needs of the community in the best way possible with a project that can be built. So thank you all. And then thank all you all who are participating. It's your all's participation that enables us to have these meetings and to continue this conversation. I know there's a lot in the chat, and you all will all get everything that's in the chat, as well as the MTA. We will distribute that. But I'm sure we can continue this conversation and we'll figure out a way to do it. But your all's participation is so important to having these conversations, even if you don't say anything, just to have all you all listening is an impetus to create better advocacy for public transit in Baltimore. So thank you.
Thank you for having us. We look forward to returning in the next few months.
Thank you all. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.